Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we are looking at what is probably rightly considered at the moment to be the best Pokemon deck in the expanded format. At the recent regional in Daytona Beach in Florida, happened on the 7th and 8th of October. It wrecked that tournament, ladies and gentlemen. It took 8 of the top 32 spots, that being 1/4, and whereas no other deck had more than 1 spot in the top 8, this one took 3 of the top 8 spots. It's Garbodor Necrozma. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Garbodor is back, and this time he's got a new friend. Now, I was part of the commentary team over at the Bilbao Special Premier event over in Spain a couple of weeks ago, and one thing I noticed there was that this deck was coming. And to be honest, before we even talk about the Pokemon, we need to talk about Dimension Valley. Dimension Valley is utterly ludicrous at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. It is a ridiculous stadium, and it just lowers the attack cost of all Psychic-type Pokemon by 1. It is wrecking the expanded format like nothing else. Now, Garbodor Necrozma might be the deck we're talking about today, but also represented in the top cut, we saw Trevenant, which used Dimension Valley, Night March, which used Dimension Valley, and in fact, all of the top 4 decks used Dimension Valley. There were 2 Garbodor Necrozma, 1 Night March, and 1 Trevenant. It really is the biggest, bestest card in Expanded at the moment. I will stand by that statement. Anyway, let's get back to this particular deck. So we start off with Garbodor, and at this stage, I'm hoping Garbodor is not a huge surprise to any of you. You've got 2 of them. You've got the one that blocks abilities, meaning your opponent cannot play a Shaman, Tapu Lele, etc. But then you've got things like Trevenant, which doesn't block your items anymore, and Volcanion, that doesn't add extra damage, and Greninja, that doesn't drop extra damage, Gardevoir, that doesn't attach extra energy. I could keep going, but I'm hoping at this stage you kind of get the point. Then you've got the one from Guardians Rising with Trashalanche, which does 20 damage for each item your opponent has in the discard pile. And I've said this many, many times before, either your opponent is going to walk into your Garbodor trap, and you're going to do a huge bunch of damage because they're playing items, or they're not going to play items, which means they're going to be slowing themselves down and they are going to be hurting themselves. Then we look at Necrozma, and Necrozma here, really we're looking at the GX attack. The ability giving it immunity from colourless Pokemon is good, especially with the fact that Drampa is very good right now. And maybe at some point Mega Rayquaza will make a comeback in Expanded. But really here we're looking at the GX attack, Black Ray GX. And the great thing about this is if we look at the energy cost, it's free colourless energy. Then we remember Dimension Valley, which lowers the attack cost by 1. So now it's 2 colourless energy, which we can do in a single card, double colourless energy. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we are off and we are rolling. You can use a GX attack for 1 energy. And the best thing about this is a surprise factor. Bench Necrozma, attach double colourless, pop a Dimension Valley in play, and then you're doing 100 damage to all of your opponent's EXs and GXs. One saving grace here is that Tapu Lele was released, because in Expanded before Tapu Lele we all had to use Jirachi that had 90 HP and would have been one-hit KO'd by Black Ray GX. So everybody right now, take a minute to think how thankful we are that Tapu Lele has made it so that we don't have to play Jirachi, or else Necrozma would be even worse. And that's essentially what you do here. You sit there doing a little bit of damage with Garbodor and the other Pokemon we're going to talk about in a minute, and at some point during the game, you drop a Necrozma and go nuts with Black Ray GX. And there's a couple ways you can do this. You can go for an early Black Ray GX. As with everything, if you do go for an early GX attack, make sure you're playing Hala to really get yourself some good amount of cards when you do the whole shuffle, refresh, new hand malarkey. But most people tend to go mid to late game. What you want to do is use a few attacks, wait till your opponent's got 2 or 3 Pokemon in range of Necrozma, with 100 HP or less being an EX or a GX, and then you use Black Ray to just get everything in one go. Just drop Necrozma, use Black Ray, and win the game there and then. Now, there are some other Pokemon to consider in this deck. First of all, we've obviously got Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele's Wonder Tag ability allows you to search out any supporter you want. That's really important with a couple of the supporters that we're going to mention in a moment. But also, being that you're playing Psychic Energy in this deck, you can actually use Tapu Cure to heal all damage from 2 of your bench Pokemon. Now, no, you're not going to want to, because the whole point of this deck is abusing Black Ray GX, but I'm saying you've got the option to do so. You've also got Drampa here. Drampa's really fancy because it's colourless energy. It gives you an attacker that isn't weak to Psychic, for the mirror match, etc. And although Necrozma does have an immunity to Drampa, remember that you're also playing Garbodor, so you can use Garbodor to turn off Necrozma's ability so that Drampa can hit it. Having said that, Necrozma's weak to Garbodor, so you might not need it, but anyway, I digress. It's just a good attacker. Big Wheel GX is a decent GX attack to give you a new hand of 10 cards, but, you know, Black Ray. And Berserk doing 180 with a choice band for free energy, as long as one of your bench Pokemon is damaged. It's a good attacker. It's nice to have in the deck. You've also got Mimikyu here. Mimikyu is here for the attack Copycat. If your opponent used an attack that isn't a GX, you can use it. And this is really handy. Again, Dimension Valley means this is a basic Pokemon attaching for a single energy. But it's just things like if you're against a Garbodor deck, you can use Copycat for 1 energy, and then you can copy their Trash Avalanche and not waste one of your Garbodor. Against something like a Trevenant, they use Silent Fear to put free damage counters on all of your Pokemon, so you then copy it with Mimikyu. And you can maybe get 2 or 3 Copycats off before Mimikyu goes down to a Silent Fear, which is kind of funny because you then get to do just as much damage to them as they're doing to you. There are a myriad of uses here for Mimikyu. They're all a lot of fun. Oricorio sees a whole bunch of play here, and this is very much a Night March counter. Night March is a deck that revolves around popping a whole bunch of Night Marches into the discard pile. Oricorio comes out with Supernatural Dance for 0 energy as long as there's a Dimension Valley in play, 1 damage counter on the field for each of your opponent's Pokemon in the discard pile. Particularly good against a deck that relies on having Pokemon in the discard pile. And then Mew from Fates Collide sees a little bit of play. Mew from Fates Collide is fun. It just allows you to copy the attacks of any of your basic Pokemon in play, and that means you can copy Necrozma here. You probably wouldn't, but you could. You could copy Mew, but the best use of this, by far, is that you can copy Drampa's Berserk for a double colourless energy. Drampa goes on the bench, you pop a Dimension Valley out, you can then use Berserk for just a double colourless energy, doing 150, 180 with a choice band, KOing EXs and GXs for 1 energy on a basic non-GX. Tell me that doesn't sound like an awful lot of fun. Now, the deck that got first place with Ryan Sablehouse and third place with Azul Garcia, they actually were identical. They look like this. But there was another deck that made top 8. It was John Eng, and he played a couple other Pokemon. He chose to use Turtonator, which is just a nice counter for any decks that are weak to fire. It's got Shell Trap, which can be quite good against Night Marchers, because if they attack into you, they get KO'd. It's fine. It's alright. Could be a bit of fun. And then he also played Seismitoad. I don't think we need to go into detail about Seismitoad at this stage. You're playing double colourless energy. Why would you not use Quaking Punch to turn off your opponent's items and get ahead in the game? Now, there were a couple of trainer cards which were particularly good in this deck. I'm not going to go through all of them, and we've talked about Dimension Valley at length, but there are a couple in Expanded which are particularly good that I think we need to mention. First of all, can I get a shout out for my boy Getsis? Getsis is the reason you should never, ever, regardless of deck, under any circumstances, choose to go second when playing in the Expanded format. It just makes your opponent shuffle all of their items back into their deck, and you get to draw a card for each card they shuffle in. With Tapu Lele's Wonder Tag, you can search this whenever you want. Turn 1, going first, you want to try and use Tapu Lele to grab a Getsis, completely screw over your opponent. Bit mean, but ladies and gentlemen, it's something you want to do. I talked about using Hala as a shuffle draw supporter earlier. Neither of the lists which did well in Daytona Beach used it. One of the main reasons here is Colress. Colress allows you to shuffle up and draw a card for each bench Pokemon each player has, which means 2 full benches gets you 10, a full 3 more than Hala, making Hala somewhat less Hala good than it would usually be. And honestly, outside of that, we see the same items and trainer cards we're used to seeing in standard format decks. Bridget for the turn 1 Wonder Tag to get all of your basics. Guzma to drag Pokemon off the bench for KOs. Sycamore is the most aggressive supporter. N is a decent backup supporter and to allow you to get some comebacks rolling on. Acerola to allow you to pick up a damaged Pokemon. Versus-Seeker to reuse all of your supporters, and yes, I know you can't use that in standard at the moment, but we're all familiar with it by now. Field Blower to get rid of tools, Rescue Stretcher to recover some of your Pokemon, Choice Band, because doing extra damage is always good, and this allows you to do 30 more to EXs and GXs, Float Stone to help you retreat, and it shouldn't surprise anybody here that our ace spec of choice is Computer Search. Remember the rule, ladies and gentlemen. If you really need to get set up, or you rely on special energy, you use Computer Search. If you can set up okay, but you really need to reuse things in the mid to late game, you use Dowsing Machine. Well, in this deck, you want to get set up nice and early, but you really need to search out your double colorless energy at some point during the game. That's why we play Computer Search. This is the deck that got first and third. Shout out to Limitless TCG for the list here. They're a great website to go and get the list. I encourage you all to check them out. And I did tell you that there was a different list that John Eng made 8th place with here. That is, again, shout out to Limitless TCG for bringing us these deck lists. They do a great job of collating them all. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, I want to know what you think. Tell me if this is the best deck in the format, or whether it's just a flash in the pan and next week we'll have a new best deck in Expanded. Let's face it, hasn't been that long since Turtonator was the best deck in Expanded. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. That's where the live action happens. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus pods, etc., you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. We did a new one this weekend. I think it was pretty good. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.